Imagine waking up to a world transformed overnight, not by innovation, but by a tide of disaster. You open your door to find your home submerged, the streets you once strolled now invisible, beneath churning, muddy water. The familiar is gone. Roads have dissolved, neighborhoods are unrecognizable, cherished possessions are swept away, and most heartbreakingly, loved ones are missing. This was the grim reality for thousands in the heart of Texas only days ago, as a catastrophe unfolded with such shocking speed and severity that the entire nation stopped in disbelief. The question echoing through every home, from small ranches to bustling city blocks, is chilling. In an age where most of us receive weather alerts on our wrists and carry advanced technology in our pockets, how did such a tragedy happen almost without warning? To understand, let's travel to Central Texas, a region defined by its rolling hills, rugged limestone outcrops, and the legendary hospitality of its people. Central Texas is no stranger to flash floods. Historically, it has been called Flash Flood Alley for a reason. The landscape here is steep and rocky, with thin soils that cannot absorb water quickly. When heavy rain falls, it has nowhere to go but downhill, picking up speed and power, sweeping away everything in its path. But what struck Kerr County and the wider region was beyond anything written in the history books. On Independence Day, a day meant for celebration, the Guadalupe River became an engine of devastation. Within just 45 minutes, the river surged to a record flood stage of more than 32 feet, swallowing homes, vehicles, and entire communities. The deluge hit in the pre-dawn darkness, when most residents were asleep, unprepared for the disaster racing toward them. By sunrise, the death toll had climbed past 120, with over 160 people still unaccounted for. Among the victims were 27 young girls attending summer camp, their laughter and dreams silenced in an instant. The nation's attention turned to Texas as President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump arrived in Kerrville. They stood among the wreckage, a toppled tractor trailer looming behind them, twisted metal and debris everywhere. The president, visibly shaken, admitted, "I've never seen anything like it." Melania Trump, usually reserved, moved quietly through the crowds of grieving families. She hugged mothers clutching photos, whispered prayers with fathers who had lost children, and promised that their pain would not be forgotten. "My deepest sympathy to all of the parents who lost beautiful young souls. We are grieving with you. Our nation is grieving with you," she said, her voice breaking. She pledged to return, offering comfort and solidarity. But the response was not just official. Over 12,000 volunteers, ordinary people from all walks of life, poured into Kerr County. They combed the debris for survivors and mementos, searching 10 hours a day, some led by hope, others by heartbreak, all united by a sense that their neighbor's suffering was their own. Thad Hartfield, leading nearly 100 volunteers, described the search as a mission of both sorrow and determination. Local churches opened their doors day and night, offering shelter and hot meals. Even those with little left gave what they could, embodying the spirit of Texas resilience. Yet beneath the stories of heroism and communal strength, a darker truth emerged. This was not merely a natural disaster, it was a technological, bureaucratic, and systemic failure. How could so many be caught unaware in an era defined by smart devices and instant communication? The roots of this catastrophe stretch back years, intertwined with neglected warnings, missed opportunities, and the relentless advance of climate change. Central Texas sits at the intersection of unpredictable weather and rapid urban development. Over decades, cities and towns have spread into areas historically prone to flooding. As more land is paved over, water runs off even faster, overwhelming natural and artificial barriers alike. Meanwhile, climate change has supercharged storms, making once rare rainfall events disturbingly common. In the past 2 decades alone, Texas has endured a string of record-breaking floods, hurricanes, and droughts, each disaster seeming to outpace the last. Despite these risks, investment in flood defense and warning systems has lagged fatally behind. In 2017, Kerr County officials submitted a nearly $1 million application to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, hoping to fund a comprehensive, modern flood warning system. The grant was denied. Local authorities were left to cobble together a patchwork of outdated sirens, sporadic cell phone alerts, and aging infrastructure. When the most recent storm struck, the system was simply overwhelmed. Communication failures compounded the chaos. Some rural areas had spotty cell service at best, Many families slept through the night without receiving any warning. The San Antonio office of the National Weather Service, responsible for much of the region, was operating with over one-fifth of its positions vacant. Understaffed and overworked meteorologists did their best, but every minute lost meant more lives at risk. I think everyone in Kerr County, wishes to God we'd had some way to warn them, confessed Mayor Joe Herring Jr., his voice heavy with regret. This disaster was the result of more than just rainfall. It was the outcome of years of underinvestment, bureaucratic inertia, and a collective failure to keep pace with the risks posed by a changing climate. Gary LeBlanc of Mercy Chefs, a veteran of 19 years in disaster relief, called the devastation the worst I've seen in my entire career. The economic costs are staggering. AccuWeather estimates losses could reach as high as $22 billion, a figure difficult to comprehend. To put it in perspective, that is more than the annual gross domestic product of some small countries. Community organizations have rallied, raising over $30 million in donations for immediate relief. The Community Foundation of the Texas Hill Country has become a lifeline for displaced families, distributing funds for temporary housing, food, and emotional support. A special emotional support line now operates around the clock, offering counseling to those traumatized by loss and uncertainty. But no amount of money or comfort can erase the trauma or bring back the lives lost. As days pass, the search continues. Volunteers work alongside professional rescue teams, using everything from trained cadaver dogs to drones and boats. Social media groups became virtual bulletin boards. One woman, Sammy Rogelski, posts photos of lost items recovered from the debris: a child's necklace, a baby's cup, a pillow marked with the word joy. These fragments are small, but each carries a world of meaning for families searching for closure. Tempers have flared in the aftermath. Blame ricochets between local officials, state leaders, federal agencies, and even the technology companies whose systems failed to deliver timely alerts. Should stricter building codes or zoning laws have been enforced? Why was the crucial FEMA grant denied 8 years ago? Could new advances like artificial intelligence-powered flood sensors, real-time river monitoring, or universal cell broadcast systems have prevented so much suffering? Texas Representative Chip Roy tried to quell the anger, insisting, "Pointing fingers is for losers." Yet the urge to find answers, to demand accountability, is impossible to ignore. When disaster strikes, it is human nature to look for causes and for solutions. This crisis is not unique to Texas. Across the United States and the world, communities face rising threats from extreme weather. In places like New Orleans, Miami, Jakarta, and Dhaka, floods have become a grim routine, testing the limits of infrastructure and government resolve. The underlying question is universal. Are we willing to invest in the technology and planning needed to keep our citizens safe? Or will we continue to gamble with lives, hoping that luck and heroism will suffice? There is precedent for hope. In the Netherlands, a country where much of the land lies below sea level, centuries of deadly floods led to one of the world's most sophisticated flood management systems. Massive dikes, movable barriers, and a network of sensors protect millions, and early warning systems there have reduced flood-related deaths by up to 90%. In Japan, another nation haunted by water disasters, artificial intelligence analyzes river data, rainfall, and even social media posts to send targeted, real-time alerts, guiding people to safety. These innovations are not science fiction. They are operational today, saving lives every year. Imagine a future where similar technology blankets Texas and the rest of the United States. Flood sensors line every river and creek, relaying data to artificial intelligence-driven command centers. Evacuation plans are crafted not just for cities, but for every neighborhood, camp, and rural home. Alerts reach every phone, every smart speaker, even car dashboards, regardless of cell service or time of day. In such a world, a disaster like the one in Kerr County could be mitigated, if not entirely prevented. But there are obstacles, some old, some new. Political stalemates and budget battles threaten progress. Memories fade, and as the waters recede, so too does the sense of urgency. Recall that Kerr County's nearly $1 million plea for a flood warning system was denied 8 years ago, a decision that haunts officials today. The National Weather Service office in San Antonio, with its chronic vacancies, is emblematic of a broader neglect in disaster readiness. When every second counts, a shortage of trained professionals can mean the difference between life and death. Experts warn that without steady investment and clear leadership, the tragic cycle will repeat. Dr. Rajiv Fernando, Chief Medical Officer for the relief organization Heal Corps, observes, This is a massive operation, expanding day by day. All of this debris drags bodies further down the river, for miles and miles. His words are a sobering reminder of the scale of the challenge and the need for coordination and resources at every level. So what practical lessons can we draw from this catastrophe? First, prevention is always cheaper, both in dollars and in human suffering, than recovery. The Federal Emergency Management Agency calculates that every dollar spent on disaster preparedness yields up to $6 in avoided losses. That means robust flood maps, modern warning systems, and resilient infrastructure are not luxuries, they are necessities. For viewers, this is a call to action. Do you know your local flood risks? Have you checked whether your community has up-to-date flood maps? Or whether officials are pushing for infrastructure upgrades? Many Americans assume disasters only happen somewhere else. But as recent years have shown, no region is immune. Get involved. Attend city council meetings. Support candidates who prioritize science-based policies. And ask your representatives direct questions about disaster funding. Transparency and accountability start at the local level. Personal preparation is equally vital. Set up emergency alerts on your phone and make sure they are enabled for your area. Know your evacuation routes and have a plan for where you will go if disaster strikes, especially if you live near rivers, lakes, or low-lying areas. Keep a basic emergency kit ready, including water, food, medications, and important documents. Talk to your neighbors. In many cases, informal networks saved more lives than official channels. Community resilience begins not with technology, but with people who care for one another. For businesses, technologists, and entrepreneurs, the lesson is clear. There is both immense potential and urgent responsibility in creating smarter, faster, and more reliable warning systems. The market for resilient technology is growing rapidly, driven not just by government contracts but by private demand. Companies are developing everything from drone-based search and rescue tools to machine learning algorithms that predict storm paths with unprecedented accuracy. The challenge is to bridge the gap between invention and implementation to ensure that solutions reach those most at risk before disaster strikes. Governments, too, must adapt. Stricter building codes and land use regulations are unpopular but necessary. In many communities, homes and businesses have been built on floodplains, sometimes against the advice of experts. Economic incentives can help. Insurance discounts for disaster-proof construction, tax breaks for installing sensors or raising homes, grants for communities that prioritize resilience. Public education campaigns, starting in schools, can foster a culture of preparedness from an early age. But technology alone is not enough. The human factor, the willingness to act, to learn from the past, and to prioritize the safety of all citizens, is what determines whether progress is made. Historian John Barry, who studied the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, observed that major disasters often mark turning points in public policy, but only if the memory endures. Will this be such a moment for Texas and for America? Let's not forget the lessons of history, the deadliest floods in American memory. From the Johnstown disaster of 1889 to the devastation of Hurricane Harvey in 2017, share a common thread. In each case, most fatalities resulted not from the force of nature itself, but from failures in warning, preparedness, and response. Communication breakdowns, underinvestment, and complacency turned manageable crises into national tragedies. The consequences of inaction are measured not just in lost lives, but in shattered economies and broken communities. The estimated economic loss from this flood, up to $22 billion, will ripple outward for years. Jobs have vanished, businesses are shuttered, and families face the daunting task of rebuilding from scratch. Mental health impacts, often overlooked, linger long after the physical scars have faded. Children traumatized by the loss of friends or homes may carry invisible wounds for life. Yet, in every crisis, there is opportunity. The response to this disaster has shown the best of American character. Compassion, generosity, determination. Volunteers have traveled thousands of miles to lend a hand. Local businesses have donated supplies and services. Foundations and individuals have contributed millions of dollars. The technology exists, the expertise is available, and the will to change is growing. So what happens next? The answer depends on all of us. Will we demand that leaders invest in the systems and infrastructure needed to prevent such heartbreak? Or will short-term politics and budget cuts keep us trapped in a tragic loop? After listening to the voices of grieving families, exhausted volunteers, and determined officials, The need for action is urgent and undeniable. Here's the secret fact history tells us. We have more power than ever to prevent disasters, if we choose to use it. Each lesson paid for in suffering becomes a chance to build resilience, save lives, and create a future where tragedy is not the price of progress. If you found this story compelling, don't let it fade with the news cycle. Share it, talk about it, and demand action from those in power. Support the organizations making a difference. Prepare yourself and your community. Let's turn this tragedy into a catalyst for resilience, so that when the next storm comes, Texas and all of America are ready. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the intersection of global economics, technology, and disaster preparedness. Subscribe for more investigations and insights, and tell us in the comments, what should leaders prioritize to make our communities safer from the next catastrophe?